Graduates and guests, it's my distinct honor to call on Pastor Liz Walker to give the keynote speech at this year's SPH Convocation. Pastor Walker.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations to the class, the graduates of 2017. This is your day. And nothing I say will be bigger than that achievement. I just wanted to talk to you for a few minutes about lessons I've learned from out here in the world, how I ended up in religion, where I started in communications. It seems like hundreds of years ago that I was on television, and in some ways it was a long time ago. But I believe that our two institutions, religion and public health, have much in common. We are both concerned with vulnerable populations, issues of social justice, and most obviously, healing. As your dean has eloquently written, public health would be remiss in ignoring the role that religion plays in shaping the health of communities. There is much room for collaboration. These troubled and uncertain times in which we live demand creative getting together to build and maintain healthy, thriving communities. In the words of Daniel Berrigan, we can at the very least stand together and utter a common outcry. There is much work to do, but I want to speak to you for just a few minutes on something a little more personal. I want to suggest to you an idea that I've been thinking about for many years that I believe is already realized in your life and in your work, an idea that I believe will ultimately save the world. It is as simple as it is profound. I want to talk to you for a minute about practicing grace. Now, by its very nature, we think of grace as a religious word, more appropriate inside a church, but I promise you I'm not here to preach. There will be no collection. Grace is thought of in the church as divine forgiveness, but I would argue that grace is much more than that. Author Philip Yancey writes, grace is the last best word in the world. We have maligned and distorted the notion of love. Perhaps we can get back to love by understanding grace. Its power has been barely tapped. It goes beyond forgiveness. At its roots, in the Greek, it is the word charity, kindness, goodwill. If you take it all the way back to its Hebrew roots, you will even find rejoicing. We give a grace period. That means they give you a little bit more time to pay something back. A gratuity, which is from this same word, is a little extra something for your service. Gracious people are those who are accommodating and giving. So there is more to grace than forgiveness. My definition of grace is based on where I live. I live in Jamaica Plain on the Jamaica Way. I don't know if you know that area, but the Jamaica Way is a beautiful winding road that goes from western part of the city into the city, and it's 2 lanes, and on a Sunday morning it is exquisite because it passes conservation land and parks and ponds, but between Monday and Friday at 9 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock in the evening, the Jamaica Way is the road to hell. The traffic is much too much for the size of the road, and nobody's going fast, but everybody's mad on the Jamaica Way. I know that because I live right on one of those corners, and if you don't have a street light on a corner or a street the stop sign on a corner, you are at the mercy of the traffic. And so if you want to get into the traffic or cross over to see the pond, you have to stand there and yell and or pray or beg, and people just refuse to even look at you. And the sad part is they're not going fast. As a matter of fact, traffic is bumper to bumper, but no one lets you in. Maybe one car in 20. Now, I noticed this weekend that the state police have put up signs on the Jamaica Way checking your speed, and so this may change, but the last time I was on the Jamaica Way, it was still hell. So here's my definition of grace. Just let somebody in. Just give somebody a break. You don't have to know them. You don't have to love them. You never will see them again. Just give them a break. I learned about this definition of grace in the time that I left television news and ended up working in South Sudan. I went there on a news story back in 2001, but because I was with some incredible people, I ended up spending 11 years between Boston and South Sudan. We went there to investigate allegations of slavery, but what we found in the midst of constant conflicts and villages burned and men murdered, we discovered people with an amazing sense of resilience and strength that was inspiring. This is a part of the world that seems always caught in conflict. There are always wars. There are droughts and famines, both natural and man-made. People are killed by the thousands and the hundreds of thousands. And in the midst of the chaos and madness, I was exposed to the kind of grace that I had never seen before. You see, people in South Sudan, and I'm sure it's this way in many other villages all over the world, consider hospitality as an art form. We think of tribes as perpetrators of conflict, and of course there is that part of the problem, but tribes actually exemplify belonging. And when you have a sense of belonging, you're not threatened necessarily by anybody else, so hospitality is what you do. It has nothing to do with your possessions. It's a way of seeing the other person. First, you see that person, you recognize that person, and you're willing to give to that person because you see, in South Sudan, people said, we belong to each other. Now, on certain levels, there's war and there's conflict, but at the bottom of this, there are people who belong to each other. I would argue that grace is a way of seeing the interconnectedness of the world. It was Martin Luther King who said, we are caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, a single garment of destiny. What affects one of us directly affects all of us indirectly. I can never be what I ought to be until you are what you ought to be. And that doesn't cost anything. Right now, my church, Roxbury Presbyterian, is working with Boston Medical Center and a number of other medical health institutions with a program on post-traumatic healing. We have decided to focus on the long-term effect of violence, loss, and grief. What happens after the yellow police tape is down and the physical wounds have healed. That pain goes on. And this kind of trauma permeates so many aspects of whole communities. And I would argue it is not just a problem of war or urban violence. I would suggest to you that we are all suffering from trauma today. All you have to do is turn on your television or watch the news. Once you watch for a few minutes, you start twitching, and then you feel like you want to slap somebody. That's trauma. It is slowly eating away at our ability to practice or even see grace in the world. Introducing the notion of grace to the children in my neighborhood is very difficult because they want to live their lives, at least some of them, on the politics of revenge. But grace in its most public form is civility. And that is getting more difficult every day. We don't have to agree. We don't have to hang out together. We don't have to hide our anger. But in seeing in each other's humanity and in seeing something possible in the other person, we can elevate the discourse and in the process, elevate each other. Ultimately, practicing grace goes much deeper than policy or law. It is simply a way of being in the world, a way of knowing that we are all connected. Desmond Tutu said, interdependence is the fundamental law of humanity. We have to relearn our approach to each other with dignity and empathy. We have a responsibility to each other simply because we are all here. So whether you end up in the bush of Sudan or the streets of Roxbury or on the Jamaica Way, there is something you can do in the way you see each other, in the way you treat each other. In the times like these, asking you to show grace in your life is asking you to be a hero, because there are voices out there that seem to insist the world is divided between us and them. I have been in many places in the world, and I am here to tell you, there is only us. Practice grace in whatever you do, wherever you work, wherever you are. And in that moment, you will have lifted all of us. Congratulations to you, and God bless.